Hi folks, this is my May Day message. It's not May Day, so I'll get it out for May Day. It'll be for May Day. So what particular message can I have for Workers' Day, which is what May Day is? And anarchists was always a big part of the workers' movement before the First World War. The Chicago anarchists, for example, is one of the reasons we celebrate May Day. But I don't want to go into any sort of historical thing about that. In fact, I'd like to talk about something that hasn't happened yet, and something I want to happen, which is something I always see. I'm always saying I'd like to see happen, and that is the British Revolution, or revolution taking place in this miserable set of islands that we dwell in. So, it's going to be abstract because we haven't had a revolution since about 1649. It's the nearest we've ever come to it. So it's completely different circumstances now. To talk about revolution vaguely, the two great revolutions of the modern era, of course, the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution, though of course there's been many other revolutions, some of them with great meaning, and some of them going on now. The world is being convulsed with the revolutionary process, although not here in England. That's my complaint. I think in the 20th century revolutions, the Russian Revolution was obviously the most effective. It was controversial. According to us anarchists, it all ended in disaster, totalitarianism, authoritarianism, Stalinism, gulags, oppression of minorities, oppression of the working class, etc., etc., etc. But when we go on about revolution, we study the actual revolution as it happened, as it could have been, why it was diverted and so on. Revolution is a continuous process. It doesn't happen in one day. It's not one storming of the Winter Palace, some orgasmic thing, and then the next day the revolution has succeeded. It's not that. The other thing of the 20th century, the thing that the left looks to 1970, but the anarchists, libertarians, people of a different stripe of mind, including some Marxists, look to the events of 1968, particularly in France, particularly in Paris, the student riots, the occupation of the factories by the workers, the whole country of France teetering on the brink of revolution. It could have been possible, but again, in a few weeks it was all gone, it was all dissipated. But it did leave a lasting legacy of how a revolution might develop in the 20th century, the late part of the 20th century. Unfortunately, we're no longer in the 20th century, we're in the 21st century, and we're getting through it quite quickly. It's 2013 already. So therefore, revolution, I think, in the UK will be a bit different from the Russian Revolution, as we've got virtually no workers at the point of production anymore. The point of production shifted all over is in China, in India and Bangladesh, South America. That's where the point of production is. So all the clothes that you're wearing haven't been made here, they've been made elsewhere with virtual slave labour. I want to talk a bit about sort of what I think a British Revolution might be like. I'm not saying that this is the way it's going to be, but this is how it's probably going to work out. But first of all, I'd like to say what I think a revolution is not. It's got nothing to do with the Occupy movement. It's got nothing to do with technical revolution, the internet or anything like that. Internet's just a tool, it's nothing else. Revolution consists of people, but it's not going to take a form, a lot of, well, as for the lefties, they're just fantasizing about something that'd be impossible to, under the present conditions, and the conditions of the future is going to be impossible to do in 1917 again. But it's also going to be impossible to do in 1968. I've been reading this David Graeber guy again, and he's saying, oh, well, we don't expect a revolution in America, read Western world, for 50 or 60 years. Well, I said that's a load of old bollocks. What's the point of being an anarchist? What's the point of being a revolutionary? What's the point of, wanting to have a revolution if it's going to happen in 50 years' time? We don't want it in 50 years' time. 50 days or 50 weeks is enough for us. That's when we want it. Not in 50 years. I ain't going to be around in 50 years unless I'm going to be like some ancient biblical patriarch and sort of live to the ripe old age of 120, I won't be able to do much then, will I? And neither will any of you in 50 years' time. So, how can revolution happen in this country? Well, obviously, we have a lot of counter-revolution in this country. This is personified. The nation, the country of counter-revolution has been for hundreds and hundreds of years. But I don't want to go about how many police they've got, how many troops they've got, how many laws they've got, how many prisons they've got, how many people actually support the status quo and so on. I'm not going to go on about that, because a revolution is when these things no longer really matter. Revolutions, I can see anyway, it's the majority of people out on the streets. The majority. It has to be something willed by the majority of people. It cannot be carried out by a party or a minority. It has to be the majority of people. So therefore, obviously, it has to involve lots of middle class people, or people that regard themselves as middle class, who could be called middle class. People that work in offices, white collar workers. Not talking about like the guys that are getting vast wages in the banks and stuff like that. I'm talking about the foot soldiers, the people that are getting sacked, the people that are in a position of precarity, that could be on the dole next week, that cannot afford to pay rents, particularly in London and so on, or buy a house or anything like that, who are becoming disenfranchised, who are becoming dissatisfied. But we're the ones that are working class. We're the ones that are disenfranchised. We're the ones that have been completely screwed over. So it's only when we get out, we'll be the first ones out on the streets, but the middle classes have got to come out as well. And we're not. A revolution has to go forward. It's a thing that grows. From my reading of revolutions, they occur on the streets. They don't occur on the internet. They don't occur on telephones and stuff like that, or sort of occupy camps and people waving their hands like this. That's not a revolution. That's almost completely irrelevant to revolution. Revolution is the mass mobilization of vast sections of the population, particularly the working class, particularly the oppressed, but also like the lower middle classes and so on. The vast majority, they have to be willing to do it. And what will it involve? It will involve mass mobilizations on the streets, assemblies on every estate, in every street, insurrectionary areas, buildings seized, obviously factory seized and stuff, but buildings seized en masse. So many buildings seized that they can't evict everybody. Yeah, they can evict the occupied camp, but if like there's over like 100 empty office blocks in a 5-mile radius, plus empty flats, empty businesses occupied by people attempting the revolutionary process and running their own lives and having assemblies, and something that's continuous, something that can't be co-opted by political parties or political organisations of any stripe. Because when a revolution occurs, we'll least expect it. The anarchists, the left, we're not going to kick off a revolution. We can be part of it, but we can't make it. There's nothing that we can do to make it. It'll come spontaneously when we least expect it, as all these things always have done throughout history, probably provoked by something that's completely irrelevant. It used to be a thing like mass unemployment could do it, for example, or the fact that people can no longer live on their wages, which is getting a position now. Look at the dire economic situation in Greece and Spain, other parts of the Mediterranean, throughout the world. And it's happening here as well. It's just going completely out of control. We've now got a situation where last week in the Evening Standard, they were having a house for sale for 250 million, and another one today, Monday, for 200 million. This is what we've got. This society, this government, they've got nothing to offer us. They're just a load of millionaires operating on behalf of billionaires. So therefore, there has to be a revolution. They have to be overthrown. Because if they're not overthrown, they're going to destroy us and they're going to destroy the planet, which they are doing. They are raping the earth in the quest for their profits. They're not actually producing anything of any worth. They're just making money. It's all Mickey Mouse money. And most of us are just living within a couple of months of being completely skinned. Your last dole payment or your last couple of wage packets. We're all going to be drawn together when it collapses. We have to be. But a revolution is going to be the positive mobilization of people. Obviously, this is a country of counter-revolution, but we're talking about if it goes beyond counter-revolution, and it doesn't involve the organised working class or the lumpen or the dissatisfied lower middle class, when they're all together. We will create our own political cultures, our own way of being, our own economy and everything. We have to completely overthrow what we've got. That's a revolution. And a revolution, you'll know when a revolution's taken place, because, as I said, there'll be barricades up on the streets. There'll be like continuous mobilizations in every school, in every factory, every place of work, every estate. It'll be going on continuously. It'll be like the Great Rush, like a tsunami, one could say. And it'll go on for a long time. Yes, there'll be fighting with the police. Yes, there'll be people trying to stop it. But the more people are involved, the less likely it is to be violent, because obviously that would mean the violence will probably come from the state. And when do you know people have reached a really genuine revolutionary consciousness? I think it's quite simple in this country. When people are mobilised, they're on the streets, they're not saying stop the cuts, but they're saying, like, you know, they're saying, let's get rid of the king and the queen. Let's get rid of the monarchy. Let's get rid of the House of Lords. Let's get rid of Parliament. Let's get rid of all these millionaires that are taking over and running our lives for their amusement. And they're destroying us, schools and everything. The schools, hospitals, national, it's all shit anyway, but it's going to be even worse when these people get their way. So yeah, it's going to be that conscious effort. It's no good parading around on May Day with a load of red flags. What you've got to be thinking is in a couple of years, that people might be on the streets. We might actually have a revolution in this country. But only under those conditions. Barricades, riots, factories occupied, like the police refusing to go in and smash the people down, or a section of them, the army refusing to. That's the stuff of revolution, demanding a complete end to the old system. That is the stuff of revolution. Now, I'm beginning to think that if you want to have a look at an example of a revolution going on today, Egypt is the place. No one expected a revolution there. And when it happened, they all thought, oh, well, it's going to go the way of Iran, the Islamists are going to take over and so on. And what we've seen is something completely different. We have seen a mass mobilization of huge sections of working class, disenfranchised youth, women in particular, people that are media savvy, using the internet, mobile phones and Twitter and so on, and their absolute determination to smash the government, which they believe, probably quite rightly, is going to introduce Sharia law through the back door, and they don't want it, and they're mobilised on the streets, and they're fighting against the police and the military, and there's fatalities. And as I speak now, there's probably some rioting going on in the streets of Cairo, streets of any Egyptian city up there in the Delta, Alexandria, Suez, places like that. There's almost an insurrectionary mood about it. It really is a revolution in Egypt. We don't know where it's going. And that's the thing about revolutions. You live them, but you don't know where they're going. There never is, a utopia at the end. It's a complete struggle. But it's liberation. It's freedom. It means the beginning of a new world. Possibilities. People that have never had a chance to be political or to express themselves or to make any kind of meaningful contribution to the economy or just basically human existence, rather than just living in boxes in families, alienated and going along with it. A revolution will bring in like complete new ways of life. I do not believe that you can be a revolutionary, that you can have an anarchist lifestyle or anything like that if there isn't a revolution. There's no such a thing as an anarchist lifestyle. I've said this time and time again. We can't give an example to the masses. We've got to go along with what happens with the masses. Obviously, we go along with the revolutionary stuff and not the counter-revolutionary stuff. We fight against the counter-revolutionary stuff. Maybe even a revolution will arise in the fight against the counter-revolution. But I think it will arise more spontaneously. It's not going to be like 1917. Neither is it going to be like 1968, although there will be echoes of it. In fact, contradictory enough, I actually believe that it's going to be more like the French Revolution. It's like a revolution going around in a circle. We're starting all over again. You have a look at what happened at the French Revolution. Yes, it ended up bad. Napoleon took over, etc. The Directory before Napoleon. Well, you have a look at what the French Revolution achieved. Completely wiped out the monarchy, the aristocracy. It brought in the masses to politics. The peasants, the artisans, the sans-culottes, the poor, women, mass mobilization. If you read about the French Revolution, it just wasn't in guys with wigs cutting off the heads of other guys. It wasn't that at all. There was much more to it about the sort of heady mobilization. And there was no working class you could speak of. There was just the poor, the plebeians, the artists, the disenfranchised middle classes who were blocked out by the aristocracy. And it's a bit like that now. We've got basically a monarchical aristocracy of blood and money ruling us, billionaires and millionaires. And the rest of us are sinking below. We've got electronics, we've got modern media, but it almost seems as though our minds and our political existence is going right way back to the 18th century. Well, you know, if it has to be a bit like the French Revolution, bring it on. The first time the masses mobilized, I'll tell you one thing about the French Revolution, and you look it up, read about it. The king was in Versailles, he'd fled Paris, and the revolutionary mob, 6,000 of them, marched onto Versailles and brought the king back to Paris. Nothing unusual about that, except these 6,000 people were all women, armed with 6 cannons, muskets, pikes and axes, women that worked in the markets and so on, fishermen's wives, they all, fishwives, they all marched. I mean, a mass mobilization of women capturing the king and bringing him back to Paris with cannons and heavily armed. That was one episode out of the French Revolution. And when things like that start happening here now, then that's a revolution. So protest against the cuts is not revolution, but mass mobilization, barricades, riots, occupations, as I said previously, is revolution. But also, of course, it's a mass involvement of all of us, your mums and dads, your brothers, your sisters, everybody. It's not a minority thing. That's what it is. And I look forward to it. So that's my message for May Day. They're having a revolution in Egypt where they said it had never happened. There's revolutions taking place all over the world. The world is ripe for revolution. And so is Europe. And so is this country. So let's have a revolution in this country. I'll be saying the same thing again and again and again. And that's my May Day message. My May Day message is fuck the Labour Party, fuck the TUC, let's have a revolution. And so I wish everybody a happy May Day, and let's hope that this year we see some action on the streets. Let's hope that this year we really do see something happening, because you can either have that building up to a revolution or just an endless succession of royal babies, trivia, garbage, King Charles, the first £1 billion house in London. Is that what you want? With no security, with like millions of people in destitution, fear and poverty. Revolution is the only alternative to this right now. And we don't have to wait 50 years. Even 50 months, which is a year. 50 weeks, which is a year, or even 50 months, which is a long time. I want to see a revolution take place soon, because I'm going to get a bit fucking fed up of not seeing one, to tell you the truth. So let's have one. Have a good May Day. See you on the streets. If not on May Day, then some other day. And keep there. And let's get it to. We've had one tiny. It's like about 1% of it as when the students were out on the streets a couple of years ago. They had all the disturbances then, and that was probably about 1% of what a revolution would feel like. Multiply that 100 times, and I think you've got a revolution. See it happening in not just in London, but all over the place. And it's important. It's got to happen all over the country. It's no good there just being a few spectacular things happening in London. It's got to happen all over the country, right? So I'm droning on as usual. So for the final time, I will wish you all a good May Day. And if I do one for next May Day, I'll come back on this particular subject. But hopefully I don't have to come back on it, because it's something might be happening anyway, and I could be very excited. So that's it. Bye.